Hola, estudiantes míos. Soy señorita Schaefer y hoy vamos a hablar de la gramática de 5B y vamos a hablar de los verbos ser y estar. Now, you'll remember we've already learned about the verb ser, we've already learned about the verb estar, and in order to make this lesson easier, I even told you about some of how to use them. But I'm just going to go ahead and tell you right now, this is in page 258 of your books, and this is probably the most complicated thing that we will do in Spanish 1. It's also one of the very most important things. It's hugely vital that you have a grasp on this as you move into upper level Spanish. And we'll talk about why it can be a little bit confusing, but we're also going to make sure that we learn it really well. So please, as you go, if you have any questions, I'll just say it right up in front. Please write them down on the side of your notes as you go so that you can remember to ask them. All right, so our big question for today is when do we use the verb ser and when do we use the verb estar? So I would leave a pretty good space for yourself to answer this question. Go ahead and write it at the top of your paper. Ser and estar both mean to be. And this is why this concept can be a little bit confusing, because in English we only have one word for to be, right? We say I am, you are. But in Spanish, they have two different words for to be, ser and estar. And we've already learned both of these verbs. We've already learned a little bit about them, but today we're going to put them together and we're going to learn about how to use them. So before we even start, please go ahead and make these two charts on your notes. And I want to make sure that we remember our conjugations before we go into how to use them. So ser is yo soy, tú eres, él, ella, o usted es. Nosotros somos, vosotros sois, and ustedes son. Remember, there are no accents on ser, but we are going to have some on estar. Our yo form is estoy. And then we have estás, está, estamos, has no accent. Estáis, and están. Please make sure that you have these down. Please make sure that you know them well. And now we will talk about how to use these two verbs. All right, so we're going to do this using these two circles. I'm sure you guys have used this in other classes before. And I want you to just go ahead and make these on your notes, please, and write ser and estar above them. If you're a color coding person, I'm going to use red for ser and blue for estar, but you don't have to do the same if that's not something that you especially like. So first let's talk about some ways that they are the same. Both verbs mean to be. Both verbs have yo forms that end in oy, right? We have soy and estoy. And both are irregular verbs in the way that they are conjugated. So these are the three ways that we can see that these verbs are alike, mainly that they both mean to be. That's a pretty big one. Oops. But I also want to talk about how they're different. Okay, and most of this is going to be in how we use them. So the verb ser is more permanent. There are characteristics that don't change or don't change as quickly. So, I mean, you can't get ridiculous with this. Like, I know you could dye your hair, but your hair is more permanently the same color. I know you could lose weight, but you're more permanently the same weight. My shirt is red would be ser. She is my cousin, right? That's not really going to change. Estar, on the other hand, is more temporary. It's conditions that do tend to change. I know we've talked about this with conditions and emotion, like I'm happy, I'm sad, I am tired. Things like that are going to be estar. Another thing that we've learned about estar is our little poem. How you feel and where you are, always use the verb estar. That still rings true. And coming from that are the ideas of location and feelings or conditions. On the other side of things, ser is pretty much everything that's not location or feeling, but we can go ahead and add a couple over here. Ser is who a person or thing is or what they are like. We've talked about that earlier this year. Remember, we would say, yo soy deportista, tú eres simpático, etc. Ella es mi prima. The other thing that we talked about, or that we will use ser for, is where a person or thing is from. Soy de Ohio. I am from Ohio. El regalo es de tu hermano. The gift is from your brother. The last thing that I want to add in here is we talked about doctor and place with ser and estar. So we kind of have three ways that we can work to remember ser and estar. So the first one is just the most basic level to remember, okay, ser is more permanent and estar is more temporary. And if you're a big picture person, that might be the easiest way for you to do this. The second way is a little bit more specific, that you can remember that ser is how you feel and where you are. Always use the verb estar. And ser is everything else. Now, one thing that I want to point out just while we're talking about this is the idea of location. I recognize that location can be more permanent. Like, our school is at the corner of McMullen, Booth, and Drew. But you're still going to use estar. No matter what, for location, you will always use estar. So, sorry that's a little confusing. The third way that you can choose to remember this, if you're more of a person who likes rules and details, you can use doctor and place to help you remember the 6 ways to use ser and the 5 ways to use estar. We're going to go ahead and do that on the next page, but please make sure that you have this whole thing copied down before you move on. So one thing that we talked about when you learned the verb ser and when you learned the verb estar is that we learned doctor, place, and that these stand for ways to use ser and ways to use estar. So for ser, we use doctor. Doctor stands for description. Blonde hair, blue eyes, skinny, whatever. O stands for origin, where someone's from. We talked about that on the last page. So like, I'm from Ohio, you're from Florida. C is characteristics, kind of like descriptions. Once again, we're describing a person, but we're describing their character. He's patient, she is kind, etc. T is time and date. This is something that we learned in Para Empezar, that we reviewed when we learned ser, that if you want to say it's 8 o'clock or it's May 4th, you're going to use ser. I know that the time changes and the date changes. Kind of how I like to view this is that no matter when you're talking about, that time will always be the same time as you look back, and that date will always be the same date as you look back. O is occupation. Once again, something that could change, but doesn't really change very much. It's more permanent. I am a teacher. He is a lawyer. She is a doctor. And then the last thing that we want to talk about again that we mentioned on this last page and last chapter is relationship. Es mi madre. She is my mother. Son mis hermanos. They are my brothers. On the other side of things, we have place for estar. Place stands for position, like standing up, sitting down. That's more temporary. L is location. I want you to go ahead and put a star next to location, because no matter if it's permanent or temporary, we always use a star for location, how you feel and where you are. A is for action verbs. This is something that we're going to learn next chapter, so don't sweat it. But basically this is ing. Like when we say I am running, that am is going to come from estar. And then the last two are how you feel. Condition, like I'm tired or I'm sick. And emotion, I'm happy or sad or surprised. Like I said, you don't have to know all of these, but if you are a detail person and you like rules, they just give you some more specific ideas on how to use ser and how to use estar. Please do make sure that they're in your notes before you move on with us. Alright, for this page, we're going to do some practice together, and then the next page is some practice for you to do. So, first sentence, Teresa blank mi prima. Teresa blank my cousin. And we're gonna know we're gonna say is, right? She is my cousin. So we need to decide, are we going to use ser or estar? Now, because this is talking about relationship, the are in doctor, we're going to use ser. If it helps you to go ahead and mark which verb you're going to use and why, feel free to do that. And then we can just conjugate it for Teresa. So Teresa es mi prima. Blank muy graciosa. She is very funny. This is a characteristic, so it's also going to be ser. Es muy graciosa. This next sentence, ¿Dónde blank María? Where blank María? Where is asking about a location. So we're asking where is Maria, and for the reason of the L, we will use estar. How you feel and where you are, always use the verb estar. And we'll conjugate for María. No puede venir hoy porque blank muy enferma. She can't come today because she is very sick. Sick is a condition, the C in our place. So we're going to use the verb estar, and we'll conjugate the same way as puede is conjugated because we know we're talking about that person. So we'll use the el ella form. Los tacos blank mi comida favorita. The tacos are my favorite food. We're going to be conjugating for los tacos, and we're talking about what they are. So we're going to use the verb ser. So los tacos son mi comida favorita. Blank riquísimos. They are super delicious. This is a description or a characteristic, however you want to see that. So we'll use ser. And we'll conjugate for los tacos again. So son riquísimos. And then lastly, mis tíos blank de Mexico. My aunt and uncle are from Mexico. This is origin, where they're from. That's the O in doctor, so we'll use ser. We'll conjugate for mis tíos. So mis tíos son de Mexico. On this page, I would like for you to practice on your own. So if it helps you, what I would do is write down whether you're going to use ser or estar and the reason, either from Dr. Place or from our broader definitions or from the little poem, and then write in your own answers. Okay, I'm going to ask you to pause this until you're done, and then bring your answers to class with you so that we can talk through them. If there are any that are especially difficult for you, please just go ahead and put a star over the number so that you can remember to ask about it, and we can see quickly maybe which ones were more confusing. So as we finish up today, I want to come back to our question, when do we use the verbs ser and estar? And this can be a complicated question in Spanish because we don't have this differentiation in English. But first of all, we use them as the verb to be. And then what I would do is I want you to please write down the way that helped you most remember, either those broader rules or your poem for Estar or Dr. Place, whichever one is easiest for you. Lastly, I would go ahead and draw your conjugations in. This is going to be something so that when you look back in this place, you can see immediately your rules as well as your conjugations. And it should help you to have it all in that same place so that you can remember. As we move on, I'm just going to implore you guys, ask you, please, 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 make sure that you know your conjugations of ser and estar. It would be a real shame if you were getting questions right but didn't know your conjugations. And go ahead and just look over again the best way for you to remember, because this is a very important concept. Once again, I said this at the beginning, but I'll say it again. This is a tough concept. If you have any questions, please go ahead and write them down so that you can remember to ask. Gracias por escuchar. I hope this went okay for you, and I look forward to hearing how you did with it in class. Adios.